Welcome back to another episode of Conservative Conversations with your host, Reid and Frank. How are you doing, sir?
Oh, I'm doing very well. Getting ready for Cinco de Mayo. Gonna be having quite a big party here soon.
Yep, it's coming up soon. I'm ready for it. And get some good beer drinking going on.
Always a good time.
That's right. And we're gonna jump straight into the news with some pretty crazy stuff that's been going on lately. First, we're gonna start with the. Oh, hold on. Lost my notes. Where'd they go? Oh, there we go. We're gonna start with the news coming out of Los Angeles County following the acquittal of the 4 officers accused in the beating of Rodney King.
Oh, yeah.
There were several days of heavy looting and rioting, and it seems to have been contained mostly at this point. The majority of the looting and the arsons took place over 2 days, which sort of came after, protests started forming outside the courthouse as soon as the verdicts were announced. And then, sort of related and unrelated to that, elsewhere in Los Angeles County and the city of Los Angeles, there were other incidents involving the police and community members that further stoked tensions amongst the community.
Sure.
And other disturbances amongst the townsfolk. Let's see, what else do I got here? The mayor, Tom, where did his last name go? Tom Bradley, declared a state of emergency and a curfew, a dusk to dawn curfew, to help with the protest and rioting, to help control it.
I'm not surprised. I heard a lot of people got hurt out there.
Yep, there were a couple big instances caught on live TV. Reginald Denny, he was yanked out of his delivery truck and he was beaten by a crowd of people.
It was like Rodney King over again.
Yeah. And then there's a couple other similar instances to that occurred. And, of course, you got the Korean rooftop shooters. That was going on.
Yeah, I heard 53 people in total is the number I've got here. Got hurt in $1 billion, what they estimate to be $1 billion in property damage. So, if you say those are dying down, I'm glad to hear it. I'm sure a lot of people are.
Yep, there was, during the major part of the riots, there was about 4,000 or so, California National Guard troops and soldiers deployed into the city.
Wow.
Yeah, that's a lot. And I think, they even have reached out to the federal, the Army National Guard to try to get them to come help out too.
Well, I'm not too surprised. I just hope they really get things back in shape out there.
Me too. It's been a crazy couple of days, I'd say.
Well, let me ask you. I'm sure everybody's asked themselves over the last few days. Sure, people have been talking about it at work and with their families and everything. But are you surprised by the jury's, how they decided that case? I mean, did you expect it to go that way, or?
Yeah, I was surprised. I mean, I'm sure a lot of people were, because the whole thing was, well, most of it anyway. I don't know about the whole thing, but it was caught on video camera.
Yeah, and
The officers.
from what I understand, they really worked him over pretty good, and of course the jury would have seen that. So I think it's kind of surprising. I mean, they were only charged with excessive force. So
Yeah.
to be acquitted, I mean, do you think it's right or righteous how people have reacted with these riots and everything? I mean,
Well,
surely not.
Well, not all the like the looting and the arson, but that's not righteous. But the people showing up outside the courthouse, protesting and stuff like that. That's all fine.
Yeah. There's a right way and a wrong way to do things.
You're right. And I've heard a lot of people complain about the jury, how there wasn't even one fully black person on the jury. It was all majority white, a couple of Hispanics and Asians, but no black people. And a lot of people thought that wasn't quite a fair jury selection.
It is interesting. It is interesting.
Yep, that's kind of the way the system goes, though, sometimes, it seems.
Well, is that all you really had on that?
I think so. Yep, that's all for now. I'm sure there could be more news about it in the next couple days.
Well, we'll just be sure and pray for everybody that died, everybody that's injured, everybody that still has to build back. But similarly to that, I think we should also still be praying for those people that got hurt in that big earthquake. Did you hear about that?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it started on the 25th, and it followed into the 26th. I guess the early morning of the 26th, they still had some pretty big aftershocks.
Right.
But, there was a 7.2 on the Richter scale out there, 7.2 magnitude, out at Cape Mendocino in the north coast of California. And apparently it was pretty bad on the Mercalli scale. It was a 9, which is considered violent. The estimates for that were about 75 million in losses, and that one had as many, from what I understand, as many as 356 injuries, people getting hurt. I don't know if you saw any of the video footage that's been submitted since then, but the whole streets were rocked. Some buildings came down, some weaker buildings. It was pretty bad. And I guess from what I understand, let's see here what I have written down. It was the first instrumentally recorded event that showed a shallow angle thrust movement on the southern Cascadia subduction zone. And that's where, because of where these tectonic plates are coming in, hitting each other, on certain parts they hit and make the earth go up, where they're making these new mountains and everything.
Right.
But on the subduction zone, that's where the land sort of kind of slips back in, folds kind of under. And so that's one of the more dangerous places out there in California. I mean, this whole area is considered dangerous because 3 tectonic plates all meet there, and they're all pushing against each other all the time, which has its own dangers for causing these earthquakes and things like that. But particularly bad, from my understanding, I'm no
Geologist.
expert on this, but from what I understand is that this Cascadia subduction zone, it has the potential to sort of sink in and swallow things up, swallow people. It could just slip, fold itself right down into the earth here at this point.
That sounds crazy.
Yeah. So it's pretty interesting because the other two, the aftershocks, what are called aftershocks, they were considered strike slip events too, and that's where sort of these plates are kind of pushing past each other. So if you fully take what I'm saying, they didn't all happen in the same locale.
Right.
It sort of is like this 3 corners area.
Right.
And they had little mini earthquakes well, not mini, quite a big one, and then they had two similarly, and not as intense, but two other big ones as well, that followed right after, but not in the same place. So you almost had like two different kinds of reactions all in the same day, where one plate is banging against another, and then on the other side of where these three plates meet, you have two tectonic plates, sort of rubbing up against each other as they're kind of going past each other, too. So, I mean, that's some pretty scary stuff. I mean, we've all known California has issues with earthquakes and everything like this, but, I mean, just to see it, so recently, so...
Yeah, just a couple days ago,
fresh,
really.
Just still been on my mind, and of course we're still praying for everybody out there too that they rebuild, and who knows, maybe even some of these places will build back better.
That's right. And earthquakes are one of those natural disasters there's pretty much no warning for, and the only way to prepare for them is to build sound structures and I guess have a safe plan to go if you need to run somewhere when one occurs.
Oh yeah, I'm sure a lot of lessons will be learned from this for many people.
I mean, because it's not like the wildfires they have all the time out there, which do occur naturally on their own without any type of human intervention. But there is a lot of human intervention that can go into preventing wildfires and forest fires spreading as much as they do and causing as much damage as they do. But you don't really have the same kind of mechanisms, if you will, for earthquakes. They just come and get you when they get you.
It's sort of scary, but if you're a religious person, I mean, that's the sort of attitude we should take about our lives in general. We could go at any moment, so you never know when the next big one's around the corner, and you just have to do what you can and be ready to meet your maker.
That's right. Just be prepared and not really worry about it, because if you're always worrying about it, you're going to be like a nervous Nelly all the time, wondering when it's going to get you. And is that all you got for your earthquake?
Well, I will also just say, thank God that's something we don't really have to worry too much about here in Ohio, But,
yeah, that's right.
But, yeah, we're praying for those people in California, and that's all I got.
Yep. Well, sort of related. This isn't an earthquake, but it's an object leaving Earth. It's the launch of Space Shuttle Endeavour on its maiden voyage just happened the other day. At 11:40 p.m. Eastern Time, the shuttle launched from Cape Canaveral.
Down in Florida.
Yep, in Florida at the Kennedy Space Center. And it is on it's expected to be a 6-day mission. The primary mission is to basically there's an Intelsat satellite, some kind of fancy satellite that's not in the correct orbit. It's in low Earth orbit, and it needs to get to geosynchrony orbit or something like that. So the people in the space shuttle are going up there to attach some kind of motor to it so it can push itself to the right spot in orbit, which sounds pretty cool.
Yeah, isn't that neat? Boy, the things they can do these days.
I know, right? And let's see, on board the Endeavour for its first trip into space is a crew of 7, and Endeavour is the first shuttle to replace the Challenger shuttle, which we sadly lost only 6 years ago.
Yeah, that was a real heartbreak.
Yep, sure was. It definitely was. But on the Endeavour, we got the crew of 7. It is the pilot, Kevin Chilton. And then everybody else has the same title, which is Mission Specialist. And there's 6 of them. And coincidentally, all the crew members are on board are on their second space flight. But the other crew members are Richard, I don't know if it's pronounced Hib or Hybe, Hibe, probably Hybe. Bruce Melnick, Pierre, probably a French last name, Thout, Thout, something like that. Catherine Thornton, Thomas Akers, and that was it.
All right.
And let's see, I think I got a couple other notes. Yes. If the crew has time, there are other payloads of opportunity experiments, as they call them. And they include commercial protein crystal growth experiment.
Huh.
No idea what that is, other than it sounds like some kind of crystals that turn into proteins.
Yeah, sounds like some kind of on Andromeda strain
Yeah.
kind of stuff. You ever see that old 60s film?
Some kind of ultraviolet plume imager. Sounds fancy.
Yeah.
And then Air Force Maui Optical Station investigation. I don't know exactly what that is. I didn't try to look, but that sounds interesting too.
You probably have to work at NASA to know that.
Yeah. But good luck, crew, on your mission to space on board the brand new Endeavour shuttle. I'm excited to hear about it. I'm a big fan of space stuff.
Now, let me ask you, you said it's maiden voyage and all that. So do they plan on using this shuttle again? I mean, do they hope that it'll hold up enough to use again and again, or what's with that?
Yeah, well, this is the shuttle. The shuttles are basic. Well, I shouldn't say they're like reusable rockets. They're not really. They get launched on top of a rocket, I'm pretty sure, and then in space they can maneuver on their own and come back, like any other spacecraft, like a giant airplane, because it has like wings on it and stuff too.
Well, that's pretty cool.
Yeah. So yep, it's gonna come back, and presumably they'll use it for other trips into space to do stuff.
Wow.
It mostly goes up into an orbit. They call it a space shuttle orbiter, and they go up and do different stuff on it. I think sometimes they take it up to the space station to.
The ISS.
Yeah.
Yeah.
To carry stuff up there and back.
Well, that's really cool. I wish them Godspeed up there.
That's right.
Space. The last horizon. Or
The final frontier.
That's it. Whatever. I forgot. I forgot the line.
Close enough.
All right. Well, that was pretty cool. You know, my family's really into space. I'm sure that was televised. I didn't watch, but I know they've filmed some of those things happening down there at Cape Canaveral before. So
Yeah.
I know I probably had some family members glued to the old tubes, to the tube set the other day.
I bet it's pretty neat stuff. I like it.
Well, I'll tell you, my last topic that really caught my eye here recently in the headlines is that, the 27th Amendment just got ratified. And it's now in effect.
Nice.
Our Constitution's been altered.
Yeah, that doesn't happen very often.
Yeah, exactly. So, it's not the biggest deal in the world, but it's kind of been an interesting story. I don't know if you've followed too much of it. It's kind of been going on slowly for a while now. But Alabama was just the last one to ratify it and make it the 27th Amendment. But This all started with a kid. I forget his name. I could look it up here. I might in a moment. But a kid wrote a paper. He had done some digging around. He was in college for social studies or something like that. And he'd done some research on, proposed changes to the Constitution over time. And this 27th Amendment is actually something that one of the founding fathers, when I look at my notes here in a minute, I'll tell you these things, but it was a proposed amendment that one of the founding fathers originally, put forward. And I guess several of the states, maybe 10 or so, kind of approved it at the time, because as from what I recall, it was like 1789 or 1788 or something like that, or 1793. I'll tell you in a second, but was when it was originally proposed. And I guess a couple of states kind of adopted it right away, but not enough did. So it kind of just lay dormant for a while. And then this kid wrote a college paper on how, from his interpretation of the law and the Constitution and everything, there's no reason that the rest of the states couldn't still ratify this proposed amendment, because several states had, and it was sort of just in this pending status for all these years.
So maybe you mean like the states that weren't yet states at the time could now ratify it?
Well, no, because let me get you the year.
Okay.
'Cause it was like 1793, so we were already a country and everything like that.
Yeah.
And so he proposed later on, like when he was, I don't know, just serving as a senator or something like that. Maybe he wrote into the Congress. I don't know. But let's see here. I'll get you the date. First of all, the kid's name who wrote the paper was Gregory Watson. Okay? And it was in 1982 that he wrote this paper. And it was in
10 years ago.
Yeah. And it was in 1789 that James Madison first proposed the amendment to the Constitution. So let's see. 1789 was when it was first proposed by James Madison. By 1792, so 3 years later, only about 6 states had ratified it. The rest didn't see it as a big deal. They just didn't get around to it. They never did it. They never voted yes or no. So it never got decided.
Oh, okay.
So this kid threw out this theory that why couldn't the states still pass it?
Right.
Because it had been submitted before the states, and it was up to them to sort of deliberate and decide if they were going to ratify this or not. So the teacher gave him a C on the paper and told him that she didn't think, even though it was kind of a cool paper, cool idea, she didn't think it could really be done. What she wrote in her terms was that it was a dead letter issue. So, sort of like, it's almost like she was trying to argue there was like a statute of limitations that had run out.
Yeah.
And so it didn't really matter. So the kid got all upset that he didn't get an A. So he got bound and determined that he was going to go out and convince all these states to ratify the 27th Amendment. And so slowly he chipped away at it. It took him, from what I read, about 10 years or so for it to finally happen. From the time he wrote his paper. But he did. He went out and I think he only had to convince, let's say there were 6, and I think maybe he had to get 38 total. So he had to get like 32 states or something to that effect. I mean, I'm not sure. I could sit here and read it. But he did. He went out and got several of the states, like whatever 2/3 would be, to sign on. And so Alabama was the last one just the other day, and now the 27th Amendment is in effect. And just so you know, in case you haven't heard, but it's a amendment that bars Congress from giving itself a mid-term or retroactive pay raise. So basically, it says that the Congress can't up its own pay until a new Congress comes in. Yeah. So it's always whatever law they make to affect pay is always going to affect the next Congress, not the current Congress.
Right. That makes sense.
So don't you think that's kind of neat? I mean,
yeah,
I had definitely heard the news, but and thought the news itself was interesting. You know, I like the idea of the 27th Amendment. I think those people make enough. I think we should pay them less.
Yeah.
But, you know, just my 2 cents there. But when I found out that kid had been working so hard on it, you know, I just felt like I had to tell that story. And I think the university, somebody at that university ought to go back and change that kid's grade from a C to an A.
Well, because he got it done. An honorary degree of some sort. That's what I would say.
Well, from what I understand, he got his degree. He just got a C on the paper when he should have gotten an A.
Well, I mean, you know, like an honorary, you know, a special award. I guess getting an A on the paper would make him happy.
Well, yeah, it'd really show that teacher if she had to go back and change that grade.
Yeah. Well, that's cool. Well, yeah, definitely pretty historic because, like we said already, that, you know, changing or adding amendments to the Constitution doesn't happen very often.
Yeah. Not an easy process from what I understand.
Not at all. You gotta get a lot of people to agree to it.
Yep. So anyway, that's all that I had there in my notes.
Well, nice.
Unless you wanted to know more, because I could go a little deeper on the issue. And of course, for our listeners, the information will be available.
Yep, we'll have the links in the show notes for most of these stories. Well, that's all I had, so I guess we can go ahead and wrap it up if you're done.
I am.
All right, then. And listeners, if you haven't noticed, it is definitely not 1992, because that's the year that all these stories took place.
This is actually 2022. We're 30 years later after these stories have taken place.
That's right. And this is just a small example of some of the content that we do on our other show, the Wicky Wacky Radio Show. You can find it wherever you find this podcast. It's
a little more lighthearted and not so news heavy. So we like to do little fun exercises like this where, you know, maybe we take a trip down memory lane once in a while.
And usually on that show, the news stories aren't real at all. But for this, we wanted to actually bring you some real news stories, but put a little bit of fun in what we typically bring you.
Yeah, and maybe you didn't know too much about these stories, or you'd only heard them mentioned, and maybe you know a little more now than you did before. I know I certainly do.
I do too. It was definitely a little bit of a history lesson also, I'd say.
I would have to agree with you.
Yeah. And I guess with that, be sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcast, Apple Podcasts, Spotify. You can also subscribe to our shows, both shows, on YouTube. And be sure to visit our website, contempconserv.net, for additional content.
And as always, thanks for listening.